Now we get to one of the weirdest episodes in art history, the Dada Movement. I'm going to introduce it with the first few minutes of a video that captures some of Dada's frenetic and playful spirit and its anti-establishment, in-your-face attitude toward literature and art. You may not have picked up the name, but in the video you just heard a reference to Hans Arp. In the Dada spirit, Arp believed that chance should determine his compositions. So he took a piece of paper, cut it up, dropped it onto another piece of paper, and glued the art that resulted. Dada artists also adapted the synthetic cubist collage method to make political statements with photos. In this photo montage, German artist Hannah Hoch had included the image of her political heroes, Marx and Lenin, as well as a map showing where women could vote. She also stuck the heads of German military leaders on exotic dancers' bodies. Here are my snipped and blown up clips of these images. This work no longer appears on the list, but Varvara Stepanova's constructivist photomontage, of course, does. So, what similarities and differences do you observe about these works? They are obviously both photomontages, so it's the same technique, but the Dada version is sharp, biting, satirical, and highly irreverent. It is profoundly anti-establishment. Artists who in 1932 attempted satire or irreverence toward the Soviet regime ended up in Siberia or on the wrong side of a firing squad. I'm guessing, too, that the Dada artist would have found Stepanova's red electrical wires over the top. The artist really is just taking herself and Soviet industry much too seriously. And speaking of over the top and maybe not taking himself entirely seriously, by far the most famous Dada artist was Marcel Duchamp. And, believe it or not, Fountain, and yes, it is just a urinal, competes with Demoiselle d'Avignon in art historians' lists for the top place in the most influential artwork of the 20th century. So here's the story behind the work from the Tate Gallery website. Duchamp purchased a urinal from a sanitary wares supplier and submitted it, or arranged for it to be submitted, as an artwork by R. Mutt to the newly established Society of Independent Artists. Now, Duchamp himself had helped found and promote the society along the lines of the Parisian Salon des Indépendants. The Society's board of directors were bound by the Society's constitution to accept all submissions by members. But they took exception to Fountain, believing that a piece of sanitary ware, and one associated with bodily waste, could not be considered a work of art, and furthermore it was indecent, presumably, although this was not said explicitly, if displayed to women. So why did Duchamp essentially sabotage his own organization? He never explicitly answered that question, but it seems pretty likely that Duchamp wanted to expose their hypocrisy and challenge what he saw as their overly narrow theory of what constituted art. In the 1950s and 1960s, when Duchamp was a heralded star of the art world, he authorized a series of replicas, including this one. The Fountain is just one example of a category of art that Duchamp named ready-mades. The Fountain and other ready-mades have frequently appeared on the AP exam, although not real recently. Here's a 2011 example from the older curriculum. Let's hear how Marcel Duchamp, sort of, answered that question in a 1965 interview with an art museum curator. And here are a few more ready-mades from the same era as the Fountain. Again, these are actually later reconstructions of those earlier works since the originals have disappeared. The snow shovel on the left is an AP Art History fan favorite. It even showed up in one year's JDCHS AP Art History t-shirt. According to the Museum of Modern Art website, quote, Duchamp purchased the first version of this work in a hardware store in 1915, signed and dated the shovel, and hung it on display from his studio ceiling. Gotta love that title. This likewise notorious painting of movement shows a kinship with Cubism, Futurism, and also with Muybridge's motion photography, on which, in fact, it's based, or may have been based, on an earlier Muybridge study, this time an early movie. So in the lower right, you see a series of images, and the link will send you to the actual movie. The Salon des Indépendants, where many of the artists we've been studying in this unit introduced their work to the world, also rejected this painting when it was submitted for their exhibition of Cubist art. The jury thought the title was too literary, and they thought the painting was too close to futurism, and there really may have been a political undertone to this decision. The futurists were viewed as right-wing, and indeed many of them did become fascists. The Parisian art scene was for the most part dominated by artists committed to socialism or even communism. This painting generated a firestorm of criticism when it appeared at the famous 1913 Armory show in New York City, really one of the most important exhibitions in art history. The show introduced American audiences to European artists such as Picasso, Matisse, Braque, Kirchner, Kandinsky, and of course Duchamp. It also featured some notable American artists, but they got a lot less attention than the Europeans. Here's a photo of the show being set up at the Armory of the New York National Guard's 69th Regiment. And here's a fun anecdote about this show and the Duchamp painting you just saw. After attending the Armory show and viewing Marcel Duchamp's nude, President Theodore Roosevelt, and this is an exact quote, said, quote, "Take the picture which for some reason is called A Naked Man Going Downstairs. There is in my bathroom a really good Navajo rug, which on any proper interpretation of the Cubist theory is a far more satisfactory and decorative picture. Now, if for some inscrutable reason it suited somebody to call this rug a picture of, say, a well-dressed man going up a ladder, the name would fit the facts just about as well as the case of this Cubist picture." When the Armory exhibition closed in Chicago, students at the School of the Art Institute celebrated the exhibition's end with a mock trial of Henri Matisse, whom they nicknamed Henri Hair Mattress. They convicted him of artistic crimes and burned 4 of his paintings in effigy. And on that note, I'll leave Dada and move on to the other celebration of inner weirdness,